On today's show, did the Celtics have a roster flaw that nobody's talking about? And did the 76ers overlook a key part of their lineup this summer? Are the Thunder the favorites to win the West? We talk about all of what we love and what we hate about every contender on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA Friday. Wes Goldberg here with Hayes from Locked On Bulls. However you might be tuning in, YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We are here today. We're talking about the contenders, according to FanDuel's latest odds, in the NBA, and the thing that we love and hate about each of these teams. So we're going to talk about basically all the teams that everybody's talking about that has a chance to win the championship, has a chance to win their conference. And I've got a list here, Hayes. I want to go through it, but we're going to go based on the odds from the favorites to win to basically the team with the 8th best odds. Let's start with Boston, the defending champs. FanDuel has them at plus 300. And the thing I love about them is the obvious thing. It's their continuity. They brought everybody back. It's Jason Tatum. It's Jaylen Brown. It's Derek White. It's Drew Holiday. It's all those guys. But the thing I hate about them, and this is probably the more interesting thing to talk about, is that Kristaps Porzingis is going to be out for these 2 months with this rare leg injury that he's dealing with. Al Horford's 38 years old. They are already pretty thin at center based on Kristaps' injury, but they could be even more thin at center really quick, and that can go from a position of strength for them to a really big weakness for them relatively quickly. We're still talking about basically the first couple months of the season. I don't know how much that really matters for Boston, but just because Porzingis comes back doesn't mean he's going to be healthy for the rest of the season either. This guy has been injury prone. So that's the thing that if I'm a Celtics fan, that's the thing that worries me is their thinness at the center position. What about you?
I completely agree with you there on both sides of that. I think you look at Al Horford at being 38 years old, and while he still definitely has games where he just you forget that he's 38 years old, like that concern is there. And then Kristaps, I think the injuries could hurt a lot more than what people are thinking. It just depends on the Celtics because we see a lot of teams after they win a title and they finally get there, they understand how to pace themselves. It's not much about the mad dash during the season. So if they're not really worried about where they're going to be seated at the beginning of the season, they feel like they can finish strong, then maybe it's not going to hurt them too much. But yeah, I won't lie to you. That front court depth there is definitely the thing that concerns me the most about the Celtics.
And they're probably fine, right? Like I think they're probably okay. But like Porzingis was such a matchup nightmare for them last year in their advantage, obviously, where they went from a great team to basically unstoppable when Porzingis was on his A game and when he was healthy. And Horford can obviously do a little bit of that kind of mismatch stuff, but if they don't have those guys, we're talking about like Xavier Tillman and things like that, fine basketball players, but not guys that you're relying on for big minutes. I don't know. It just sort of feels like that was such a big part of their identity, and if you take that away from them, they become much more human. They go from like sort of superhuman to human. And if you're human, you could be beat. And in an Eastern Conference where Philadelphia got better, we'll talk about the Knicks a little bit later on. The Pacers just played them in the Eastern Conference Finals. Who knows what else is going to happen? Not to mention, if they do make the finals again, who they might meet in the NBA Finals. If they don't have that element, then yeah, that could sort of short circuit their attempt at a repeat here. But let's go ahead and move on to the Oklahoma City Thunder. According to FanDuel, their odds are plus 700 to make the finals. I love that they're doubling down with Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein. Not necessarily doubling down on what they are doing. In fact, they just went out and addressed their weaknesses. And this is Sam Presti learning from his mistakes, I think, from the Kevin Durant, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Serge Ibaka years, where he was so gung-ho about building the back end of the roster through the draft and developing talent the way that he developed talent at the top of the roster, that team really needed sort of playoff-ready veteran players. And the Thunder had a great year last year, rose all the way to the top of the conference, and this team is ready, right? This team is ready to go. Shea is that dude. Chet Holmgren is that dude. Jalen Williams is going to be that dude. So they went out and just got Caruso and Hartenstein to basically round out some of the weaker parts of the roster. Hartenstein's going to help them on the boards. Caruso just gives them another perimeter defender that is already chock full of perimeter defenders. I love that they're doing that. Before I talk about what they hate, what are your thoughts on the Caruso and Hartenstein moves now that we're a couple months removed from them happening?
I love them. They were exactly what that OKC Thunder team needed, in my opinion. Like, you now have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's no slouch defensively, Alex Caruso, Lou Dort. You have such a nice defensive rotation that you could throw out there on the perimeter that I think is going to do wonders for him, as well as Alex Caruso and how many extra offensive opportunities he creates by his deflections and that type of thing is going to be great. And Hartenstein, getting Hartenstein on this team to be able to move Chet to the 4 is such an underrated move that I think people really won't quite grasp how great this could be until you see it during the regular season, because I think this is one of the more underrated moves of the offseason for sure.
They can match up against Denver with Nikola Jokic. They can match up against Minnesota with what they've got going on in their front court, Cat and Gobert. I mean, it gives them now that other option. It gives them the other kind of tool in the toolbox that they didn't have last year, right? Like, this is a team with the Thunder, and I think you could say this about every team in the West. I don't think that there's a team in the Western Conference that could beat every other team in the West. I think you get to these top teams and you get to some playoff brackets, and it becomes so matchup dependent. But I think the Oklahoma City Thunder have just sort of thwarted the matchup dependency thing with these moves, where now they don't. Last year they had to worry about getting a big team. Now they don't really have to worry about that anymore because they got like 2 7-footers who can play with each other. So yeah, I love that. The thing I hate about Oklahoma City is shooting going to be a concern for them.
It could be. It definitely could be. I think that Alex Caruso had one of his best years for volume and three-point shooting percentage of his career. When you combine those two things, he had a season where he shot higher, but it was only like 2 3-pointers per game. So if that maintains for him, he can help that a lot. I mean, every team has their weakness. I do think shooting can be the Achilles heel of them at times, depending on the matchup that they're facing. But it's not too big of a one to where I'm like it's this glaring hole for the Thunder though.
Yeah, they led the league in three-point shooting percentage last regular season, but they were 9th in the playoffs. They went from 39% shooting to 35.5%. That's a big drop. And the thing about the Thunder is that like their best players aren't necessarily awesome three-point shooters.
Mm-hmm.
So when they put their best 4 or 5 out there, they might not have the three-point shooting to go with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, so that is who. That's our first 2 teams. Let's go to Denver plus 900 for FanDuel. This one's kind of easy in terms of what I love. They still have Nikola Jokic. That seems to matter. The thing I hate, these last 2 summers of offseason moves, they have basically replaced KCP, Jeff Green, and Bruce Brown with Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric. Not great.
Yeah, the depth is the biggest concern. They're like, that was one of the things that was special about that Denver Nuggets team when they won a title, and them losing Bruce Brown and KCP over consecutive off seasons, I think is huge for them. Yeah, they added Russell Westbrook, who we'll see what they have there. They have some young guys as well that I, hope that they may be looking at, hope that that's going to step up and maybe show that they can do some things. But ultimately, they just don't have that same firepower that they had off the bench at one point.
I think if this were the Lakers or the Warriors or the Knicks, they would be getting crushed by the media right now with how they've handled this roster, right? You've got Nikola Jokic in his prime, a team proven to have won a championship in 2023, and you let 2 key pieces go. You still haven't re-signed Jamal Murray to an extension. He's a free agent right now next summer if nothing happens there. They would be getting crushed if they were a big market team, in other words. The way that they have treated Jokic. Like, we talk about how the Lakers owe it to LeBron to maximize his window. Steph did owe it to the Warriors, but I don't know. It just feels like these windows can close so fast. And Calvin Booth, was it last summer, gave that interview to The Ringer about, we're not necessarily trying to win repeat championships. We just want to win many over the course of a decade. Well, I guess everything according to plan so far, because you didn't repeat, and it doesn't look like you're gonna. So I don't know. This team needs real improvements. I think Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric are fine, but just considering where they were to where they are now, and everybody around them has just gotten better, I absolutely hate what they've done the last 2 summers. And I know it's ownership, maybe just being cheap and all these things, but I don't know, it's a tough look. It's a tough look for them, and these recent draft picks haven't exactly worked out either. There's obviously still time for those things to work out, and they really need those guys to work out. Philadelphia is next, but we're going to talk about that on the other side of the break. Did Philadelphia or New York have the better offseason, and did they accidentally open up big holes in their rosters this offseason. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. We're talking about what we love and what we hate about all of the NBA title contenders. We're talking about Philadelphia right now. So FanDuel actually has Philly and New York even odds at plus 900. Denver also plus 900. So they kind of have these three teams, I guess, in the same tier. The thing I love about Philly, Paul George, best offseason addition in the league. Perfect co-star, I think, next to Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. Just a guy who can fit in, isn't going to demand the ball, but can also kind of carry the offense if Embiid is hurt or if Maxey's injured or when one of those guys are on the bench and whatever. The other thing I like, too, is that Joel Embiid, winning a gold medal with Team USA, has experienced winning at a high level now. And I think that's going to matter a lot for him and maybe how he approaches this regular season. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. I think we usually see that from a player that goes on that type of run. When they come back, it's a different level, right? So I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility.
So the thing I hate about them, though, is their front court size. What's their starting five right now? Is it going to be Maxey, Paul George, Kelly Oubre, Caleb Martin, and Embiid? Are they really going to start Caleb Martin at the 4? Because that's what the reporting out of Philadelphia makes it sound like. And Miami tried that with Caleb Martin. It wasn't viable long term. It was basically a desperation kind of lineup they had because they didn't really have another power forward on the roster. It's a little bit different because Embiid is just way bigger as a backline guy than Bam, who's still a little bit undersized at that position. But I don't know. I think about the competition that they're going to have to go up against, whether it's Giannis and Brook Lopez in Milwaukee, Boston's front line when it's healthy, even with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum there. I don't know. Caleb Martin is that starting 4. It makes me a little anxious. I know they added Yabusele and stuff like that. It's still not like a ton of size there. He's relatively unproven. So I don't know. That's the thing that makes me a little nervous if I'm Philadelphia.
No, I agree with that. I think, especially when you look at the fact that even taking out the position that he's going to play, but when's the last time a Miami Heat role player went to another team and they actually had the same production when they were with the Miami Heat? That's another thing in of itself. So that should cause some concern there. But I like a lot of what the 76ers did to revamp this team. I got to commend them. I didn't think they were going to be able to turn over as much as they did with the quality that they were able to bring in here. But that starting 4 position, I still think we're probably going to see a lot of Joel Embiid and maybe Andre Drummond out there on the court together at times.
Okay,
and that may fix some of that, but yeah, it's definitely a question mark there for sure.
They could start Kyle Lowry at the 4, but no, I think I love their offseason. They're the undisputed winners of the offseason. They got the best guy. They used the cap space. They're the only one to make a acquisition of that magnitude. They're the absolute winners of the offseason, but it came at a cost. And this is a team that could be a move away, but I think Philly's going to win a ton of games in the regular season, and I think they should be considered, real front runners or at least contenders to get out of the East. Let's talk about the Knicks. What I love about the Knicks, I know the pecking order. It's more of a vibes thing, and the Knicks have been a vibes team for the last couple of years. I know the pecking order. I know it's Jalen Brunson at the top, right? I know it's Mikal Bridges and Dante DiVincenzo kind of as those other secondary scorers. I know what Josh Hart is going to do. I know what OG Anunoby is going to do. I know it's a Tom Thibodeau coach team. I know what it's going to look like. I know what it's going to feel like. I know what it's going to sound like. Like like you got the Villanova thing. Like the vibes are great. The pecking order makes sense. It is just a well-built machine. It's very like militaristic in that way. You got like the captains and the generals, and then you have everybody else underneath them. They also might be the deepest in the league at positions 1 through 4, right? From point guard
for sure
to the wing. Like they just have so many dudes. They have so many guys who are kind of being cast in lesser roles than they're capable of, but that allows them to kind of star in their roles. So that's great. The thing I hate about the Knicks is that I didn't include the 5 for a reason, because their options at center are not good. Hartenstein's gone in Oklahoma City. We already talked about that. This was a team that was number 1 in rebounding rate last year. That was a big part of what they did. Hartenstein in the playoffs was a monster on the boards. That is huge. Mitchell Robinson, if he's healthy, can be that guy, but he's never healthy. And I don't think the Knicks are counting on him to be healthy for 82 games. He's healthy right now. We'll see how long that lasts. They brought back Precious Achiuwa, but he's still a little undersized at that spot. They have Jericho Sims, but he's not like a proven NBA every night rotation center. I think we're going to see a lot of Julius Randle, a lot of OG Anunoby perhaps at the 5. But OG Anunoby isn't the healthiest guy either. Julius Randle's coming off of a major injury. It just feels like there could be nights where Tom Thibodeau's looking at his rotation and he's like, I don't have any centers. And that's the thing that worries me a little bit. I'm not sure like getting rid of Hartenstein at the cost of all the other moves they made might not be worth it in the end.
For sure, especially when you look at like you said, Mitchell Robinson and his health concerns. Like if he's there, of course, if Mitchell Robinson has a healthy to relatively healthy season and he's healthy in the playoffs, it mitigates that some. But I'm just going to introduce something else. One of my biggest concerns for this Knicks team is that they have one on-ball shot creator in Jalen Brunson.
Yeah,
one.
Yeah.
And while Julius Randle has done that okay at times, maybe he with all the other like you said, the depth that they have 1 through 4, maybe that's mitigated some, but that's my biggest concern with the team. You have one on-ball shot creator in Jalen Brunson, and we've seen it already. If you're able to slow Jalen Brunson down, if he's not 100% healthy, that offense, all as good as they are, can be, especially in transition, it all comes crashing down.
And fortunately for them, Jalen Brunson has been a guy who plays most games. 77 games last year, 68 the year before that, 79 the year before that. But I don't know, like if he misses a month because of some sort of like ankle tweak or something, that could really hurt the Knicks. I mean, that's a team that could go from that can like let them slip into the play-in tournament in the East potentially, considering how tight the Eastern Conference can be at the top. So I'm with you there. It also makes Julius Randle like weirdly important to them, which was never the plan, I don't think, right? Like that was the guy that every Knicks fan was plugging into the trade machine to go get that next star. And maybe he could still be that guy that you could plug in to maybe make that upgrade. But if there's no other changes to the roster, you really need Julius Randle to be that second creator, because I think the book is out on Mikal Bridges. Like he's a good offensive player. He's not going to be a number 1. He's probably not going to be a number 2. This team was so reliant on Dante DiVincenzo last postseason. Thank goodness he was awesome in the playoffs for them, because if they didn't have that, you're right. Like it's basically Brunson or bust, right? It kind of goes hand in hand with the pecking order thing I was talking about too. It's like, all right, we know he's the best guy, but like, who's the second best guy on this? I'm not sure we know that.
Yeah, that's a fact. And you have a lot of people battling over that title of the second best guy. And then even if they are the second best guy, they still don't really replicate what you're able to get when you get Jalen Brunson. So
if I were to give you a free $10 bet on FanDuel and you had to bet and you had to use it on one of these plus 900 teams, who would you do? So again, Denver, Philly, and the Knicks, all even odds at plus 900.
If I knew Joel Embiid was going to be healthy in the playoffs, it'd be the 76ers for sure.
Why do I still want to go Denver?
I understand that. Yeah. I can't knock you for that one.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not the Knicks.
That's for sure.
The clock is already ticking on the Timberwolves. We'll talk about what's next for them on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. Maybe you're having trouble moving up at work, or you've run into a wall in a relationship. Maybe you're anxious or sad and you just don't know why. Therapy can be different for everybody. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team winning, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. What we love and what we hate about each of the NBA contenders, according to FanDuel. Dallas, plus 1,000. Little surprised that their odds are worse than the other teams we were talking about there, considering they were just in the finals. Maybe that's just because they play in the West and it's more difficult. But what I love about Dallas, kind of the opposite of what we were talking about with Denver. their last 2 years of front office decisions have been slam dunks. Have they made a bad move? Like, they haven't made not one of these things since Nico Harrison got there has been the wrong thing for him to do. Everything is worked out. Kyrie Irving, adding PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, tanking and getting Derek Lively. Everything is worked out. And I really like the Klay Thompson addition for them. There's questions about how that might go. We can talk about that here in a second. But it's just a good addition. Another look that they didn't have. A guy who can actually make an above the break three. They shot less than 30% on above the break threes in the finals against the Celtics. A big reason why they lost. They were more reliant on corner threes than any team in the league, and they got a little predictable, a little paint by numbers offensively last year. And if you add Klay to the mix, who's this awesome off-ball mover, can shoot from anywhere from beyond the arc, I just think that adds a little bit more unpredictability to that offense that it really needed. And then, like, everything that I'm hearing about Derek Lively like everything out of Dallas is that he's awesome, and he was already great as a rookie, but he's only going to be better in this second year. And in terms of their offseason moves other than Klay, like going from Derrick Jones Jr. to Najee Marshall, not a huge drop-off. They saved a little bit of money there. Didn't overpay for DJJ. So I didn't mind that move. What I hate about Dallas, I guess, going into the season is there going to be pressure to start Klay? Because I'm not sure their best 5 players is also their best lineup when you're talking about fit, what you're giving up defensively starting Klay. So I guess what I'm asking you is, what do you think about Klay?
I mean, the way I've always looked at Klay is that he's better than Tim Hardaway Jr. That's the way that I always judge it by. Like, he's coming in, he's replacing Tim Hardaway Jr. He's better at everything that you wanted from Tim Hardaway Jr. He does better in every single shape, form, or fashion. I'm actually the opposite of you. You said that you think Najee Marshall isn't that big of a fall off from Derrick Jones Jr. That's my biggest concern with the team. Derrick Jones Jr. perimeter defense was so important for this Dallas Mavericks team in that run that I am looking at it and saying, I'm just a little bit concerned that Najee Marshall isn't going to be as versatile as a defender of Derrick Jones Jr. Now, if you get Klay being solid defensively, he's probably going to be in that starting lineup. Maybe that's lessened some, but that's my biggest concern with the team is that, yeah, you've replaced a player that brings a lot of what Derrick Jones Jr. brought, but I think the separation between them could be a big key factor for them in the playoffs.
Yeah, and you kind of get into what I was kind of alluding to earlier, where your best 5 players might not be your best starting 5, lineup mix. Klay is a better player than Najee Marshall even at this stage, but you might be forced to play Marshall over Klay Thompson to start the game, to close the game, because you just need somebody who kind of looks like a wing defender. And if the lineup in those moments is going to be Luka, Kyrie, Klay with PJ Washington and Lively or Gafford, like, there's not a lot of perimeter defense there, and you're already kind of behind the 8 ball when you have Luka and Kyrie. As much as they try defensively when they're at their best and totally engaged, they're not stoppers the way that Derrick Jones Jr. was for them last year. So Najee Marshall really does have to be that guy. And if what's the difference between Najee Marshall and Klay Thompson? And can you really afford to take Klay Thompson off the court in those big moments when he does tend to perform his best, and then put Najee Marshall in there because you got to stop the other team? It's going to be tough for Jason Kidd to kind of figure out that chemistry,
Yeah, and that's going to be up to Jason Kidd, like you said, to balance that out, and hopefully he is able to find that balance, because if he's not, it's going to be ugly.
And the thing about Klay, too, right, is last year there was so much drama and whether or not he was starting, coming off the bench, and all these things. Like, is there going to be pressure to start Klay regardless of the results on the court? That's the other thing, because if he's just better Tim Hardaway Jr., that's great. The great thing about Tim Hardaway Jr. is you didn't feel forced to start him, And so if he's just this awesome shooter off the bench and kind of plays like a Ray Allen in Miami role, I think that's a slam dunk no matter what. But that would also be dependent on a guy like Najee Marshall or somebody else. Maybe it's Quentin Grimes, somebody else sort of stepping up and becoming that and filling the void that Derrick Jones Jr. left. Our next team here is Minnesota. FanDuel has their odds at making the finals at plus 1,200. The thing I love about the Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards is ascending. They added Joel Ingles and Rob Dillingham. That's just good business. The thing I hate about this team is that an injury to Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, or McDaniels, they're like one of those injuries away from being in real trouble. Like Cunningham or Dillingham's not ready to play big minutes for a team that wants to win the championship. Like, they don't have a ton of backcourt depth, a ton of ball handling behind Edwards or Conley. And I do wonder if we already saw the best season that Cat and Gobert will ever have together, because it kind of felt like a dream a little bit. Like, it couldn't not have gone better, and that's awesome for them. But if you've already kind of come off the season where it couldn't have gone better, then doesn't it also, like, by definition, have to go a little bit worse at least? So I don't know. It feels like the clock is already ticking on this team a little bit. We've like the financial concerns with ownership and all that's already been out there, Hayes. Like, we know about all that stuff, but
Mhm.
it's also like really real. Like, if Anthony Edwards is that dude and he's ready to go after this championship right now, it feels like the clock is starting to tick on them. And one injury, one kind of cat go bear thing, they don't get along, that could derail a very valuable season to them.
I agree with everything you said there. I think that it could, and it's up to them to find that balance or make a decision on who they're going to move if they do decide to move one of those guys. And if they do, that you got to hope that you're going to bring in somebody who is going to be ready to go right away, who's going to be able to fit in. Because if you have any other chemistry issues after that point, you're just right back in the same place.
They really need Dillingham to be good.
Yeah,
Like,
and hopefully
soon.
he is. I like Dillingham. I like
Same.
him a lot.
No, I'm a fan, and if you're gonna put him on a team, it helps to have a team with like a back line of 2 7-footers who can kind of cover up for the lack of his lack of size and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, having McDaniels on the perimeter, Edwards when he's locked in is an awesome defender, but like this team is an injury away from at the wrong time from being in a tough spot. Last team we're gonna talk about here is the Milwaukee Bucks. They're plus 1,300 to make the finals according to FanDuel. That I hate about the Milwaukee Bucks is their lack of athleticism. So. The Bucks, and this is from Tim Bontemps at ESPN. He dug up this stat. The Bucks and the Blazers were the only teams in the league to have only 2 players make at least 25 dunks. One of them was Giannis at a league high 251, so he's obviously a super freak athlete. But basically, what I'm saying is that outside of Giannis, this team doesn't have any super athletes. Because the other one was Brook Lopez, who had like 30 something dunks. He's not
Mhm.
like an athlete. He's just huge. So this team does not have a ton of athleticism. Like their additions over the offseason, Prince, Gary Trent Jr., DeLon Wright, like those guys are good rotation players. I like those additions, but they're just not adding sort of like more athleticism to this roster. So that's sort of a glaring thing for me, especially when you consider what kind of players these teams are going to go up against at the highest level. The thing I love about Milwaukee, though, is I think for sure you're going to get a better 2-man game coming from Giannis and Dame. They're going to have a whole year together, year 2 of that group. You have Doc Rivers there for a whole season now. You got a whole training camp with Giannis and Dame, which they didn't get considering how late the Dame trade was last summer. So I think we're just due for better chemistry between Giannis and Dame. I just don't know that it's going to matter in the end, even though I don't know. I think I'm a little bit more bullish. I'm higher on the Bucks than consensus is. Where are you on the Bucks?
I'm probably lower than the consensus on the
Okay.
Bucks. Like I just look at this Bucks team and I'm not moved. I'm not moved at all by the Bucks team. And maybe that blows up in my face. But I look at this team and I just think they're going to have serious questions. The perimeter defense is going to be a question for them again. When things ratchet up in the playoffs, I just don't know if they're going to have it. And I don't wish bad upon the Bucks at all, right? But
Right.
I don't believe in this roster. I just don't. In coaching as well, Doc Rivers, for what it is, Doc Rivers is a very flawed coach. In certain areas, he's really good in certain areas as well. And I just don't know if I trust that he's going to coach this team to where some of their issues and errors are not going to be as big of a glaring hole for the team.
Yeah, I think Doc is like a regular season wins machine. His postseason struggles have been well documented. And when I say I'm higher on the Bucks, I just think that like I've got them in the same sort of regular season tier as the Knicks and the Sixers. I think they're going to win a ton of games. In other words, in the East,
Mhm.
they could be the number 1 seed in the East. I don't think it would be that shocking if that were the case. They
Yeah,
still have
I can agree with
Giannis,
that.
like
Yeah.
at the end of the day. But the Chris Middleton thing is really tough. Middleton is what 34. Giannis or Dame is 35. Giannis in December is going to be 30 years old. It feels like yesterday
Really?
he was
That makes
26.
me feel old now. That
Right?
makes
I
me feel
know.
old.
I know. Like this team got so old so fast. Brook Lopez is 32, 33, 34, whatever he is. Like this team got so old so fast that this could go the complete other way. Like if this team is not where it wants to be and Middleton is still dealing with his 63-year-old ankles and all these things by February, they could like blow this thing up. I don't know. I don't know what that looks. Is it trading Brook? Is it trading Dame? Is it doing whatever? Trading Middleton? I don't know. It could be a volatile year for the Bucks. It could be, which is saying a lot considering how volatile last year was for the Bucks. But yeah, the lack of athleticism is sort of related to the general age of this roster. In other words, this team is really old, and really old teams can be flimsy, and the Bucks definitely qualify as that. All right. That's everything we loved and hated about the top 8 teams according to FanDuel odds to make the NBA Finals. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On NBA and making Locked On NBA your first listen every day, everydayers. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get your podcasts.